Hello, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Christian, and I'm an engagement coordinator at the NAOC.
Hello, Mr. Ambassador. I'm Marina, and I'm an outreach coordinator at the NOAC.
We are honored to be joined today by His Excellency Patrick Van Gheel, the Ambassador of Belgium to Canada. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get into opening remarks, I'd like to briefly go down your bio for our audience. His Excellency Ambassador Patrick Van Gheel studied law at KU Leuven and began his diplomatic career in the early 2000s. Spent a combined 8 years as a councillor in the Permanent Representation of Belgium to the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris, followed by the Permanent Representation of Belgium to the EU and the WTO in Geneva. After returning to Brussels for a term as the Director of European Affairs in International Trade at Belgian Federal Public Service, His Excellency then served as the Ambassador of Belgium to Cuba and the Dominican Republic between 2015 and 2021, while also concurrently serving as the Director EU Trade Policy and WTO Foreign Affairs from 2018 to 2021. His Excellency Van Gheel also joined us in Ottawa and became Belgium's Ambassador to Canada in August of 2021. Your Excellency, we invite you to begin with some opening remarks before we get to the moderated questions.
Well, thank you very much for hosting the event this morning. This is actually, when you read my bio, this is the second time that I serve in Canada. I actually started as a young intern at the Belgian Embassy 25 years ago. So let's say I came back 3 years ago, and it's a pleasure to be back in Canada. For all the young people who are out there, one of the objectives of this embassy is the commemoration of what happened during the First World War and the Second World War. Belgium will never forget the sacrifices of the young Canadian soldiers during those First World Wars. And actually, one of the objectives remains to keep this memory alive. And in the beginning, I thought that it would be very, very difficult because it's been a long time. But in reality, I see a lot of interest by the young generation, in particular, to keep this memory alive. And now we have a lot of new applications as well. At the moment, I'm speaking to you with several hats because I'm the Belgian ambassador, but I'm also the representative of the presidency, the Belgian presidency of the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union. And this is the 13th time that Belgium, because we're a founding member of NATO, we're also a founding member of the European Union, and this is 13th time that Belgium actually takes over the rotating presidency of the European Union. So I speak both with a NATO head and a Belgian head, and of course a European head. And then it comes to cooperation between the two countries, one cannot forget that we're also a federal country. Canada is a federal country, Belgium is a federal country. And even when it comes to military matters, this is something that actually makes a difference because we're both members of the Francophonie. And when it comes to having certain missions, for example, in Africa, NATO or other military organizations will be looking to French-speaking soldiers, so they can find them in Belgium, they can also in Canada. So that's also something which links the two countries together. But I'll leave it here for the opening remarks, and I look forward to the questions.
Your Excellency, thank you for the opening remarks. Audience members, do not forget to leave any personal questions in the YouTube live chat for our upcoming Q&A segment, and we will now proceed with the moderated questions that were prepared by our NAOC team. April 4th, 2024 marked 75 years of NATO ensuring the collective defense of its member countries. Along with fellow members of the Brussels Treaty, in 1949, Belgium joined fellow nations from Europe and North America in a novel transatlantic treaty. NATO, since 1949, has been a strategic security alliance defending shared values and, most of all, peace in modern geopolitics. So, since 1949, how has Belgium's role evolved within NATO?
Well, Belgium is one of the most open economies in the world. And as already mentioned, the First World War, the Second World War, it makes that we want to work together with other countries in a multilateral context. So for us, for Belgium, joining NATO was something which was quite evident. And what we have tried to do during the last 75 years was to be a loyal partner to the organization. Now the organization has gone through a lot of changes. The security context, unfortunately, has changed, which made NATO again very relevant for just keeping our prosperity. So we try to do our best. One of the angles that is probably particular to Belgium is also making sure that we work both in the NATO context, and that remains the norm. And I reassure all Canadians that all the military standards come from NATO, that it remains the basis for the Transatlantic Security Alliance. But at the same time, I think that the European Union should also step up in the defense field. And we should have a European Union partner that takes on more responsibility. And in general, when I look a little bit at Canada and what we have in common also in NATO is also the fact that there's certain notions that we support, like the women and peace notion, the integration of the gender dimension in the work that we do as NATO. This is really important for us. Another element that we certainly have in common is making sure that it's not only about military equipment, just the buying and the standards. It's also about innovation, and we are a large contributor to the what they call the Diana Accelerator. So it's the Defense Innovative Accelerator for the North Transatlantic. If we'll go into probably a little bit more what Belgian defense has done, but I think one of the elements that we've seen in Belgian defense in the last year was just a reinforcement of the innovation pillar, was an enforcement of the industrial base. We're not there yet, but it's an important change. I'll leave it for that for this question.
Thank you. I wanted to also ask, as a long-standing member and host of the Alliance headquarters, what does it mean for Belgium to be a part of NATO in a time of Russian full-scale war in Ukraine? Belgium was one of the promoters of NATO's deter and detente policy. Does Belgium stand by that mission to this day, or do you see other priorities for NATO now?
Well, the policy that was actually worked out by our foreign minister in 1967, if I'm not mistaken, the deterrence and the detente at the same time. It was in the context of the Cold War. We believe that this policy has not really lost any of its relevance. It's still at the core of NATO. I think it's at the core also of other organizations like the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. So yes, we do stand by this policy. In general, for us, investing in this also making sure, like we said, is making sure that we keep our wealth, that we keep our prosperity, and that being an open trading nation, that this can help. So yeah, the answer is yes, definitely, it's still on board, and I think our foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time had a really foreseeing thought about security.
Belgium is also involved in various NATO training and capacity building initiatives. For instance, Belgium has already trained nearly 2,500 Ukrainian soldiers, according to the Belgian Defense Minister, Leuven did under. It also has contributed over 1.2 billion to Ukraine since Russia invaded in 2022. What are Belgium's plans for long-term engagement in Ukraine, both during and post-conflict? And is committing ground troops on the agenda?
Okay. Other members of NATO, like other members of the European Union, Belgium stands, of course, with Ukraine. And I think the question is very large. You have to look at it from a global angle. It's military, yes, but it's also making sure that we start building up again, reconstructing Ukraine. Our Minister for Development was not too long ago in Ukraine to talk about the needs, and we take this very seriously. Of course, like you mentioned, we are part of different coalitions when it comes to, for example, the F-16 coalition. Belgium is there. We train Ukrainian pilots to make sure that they can use our fighter jets. but also making sure that the maintenance of those airplanes can be done. So we try to be there coalitions. It's not always been easy because unfortunately, well, we were not expecting the invasion by Russia of Ukraine, and our defense in the past has been very much focused on international missions. So just being a loyal partner of the European Union, of NATO, also of the United Nations, we had our focus very much set on international peacekeeping operations, a little bit like Canada. So now suddenly we are faced with this aggression, and yeah, then it makes that we have to change our policy, also making sure that we provide again the necessary support for the defense of the European territory and its people, and support for Ukraine. So we try to do it in all ways possible, 360 degree. When you look at one of the efforts we've done together with Canada, for example, is it might surprise you, but one of the elements of the trade between the two countries is actually diamond trade. So the Canadian diamonds come to Brussels, to Antwerp in particular, and then what we wanted to make sure is that Russia could not profit anymore from all the Russian diamonds that were being sold in the G7. So together with Canada and the other members of G7, we're a member of G7, but we took the initiative together with the members of G7 to make sure that we would ban, for example, all the Russian diamonds in the G7, and that's also a way of support. So when you talk about Ukrainian support, we have to see that in a very, very broad context, and also making sure that afterwards we are there to help in the reconstruct. The Prime Minister Trudeau was there together with our Prime Minister Alexander De Croo in Kyiv, with unfortunately to commemorate the second year of invasion of Ukraine in Kiev. So yes, these are unfortunate circumstances, but we stand by Ukraine. And when it comes to having European soldiers in or Belgian soldiers in Ukraine, for us, it's not on the agenda at this point.
Speaking of sanctions, I know Your Excellency mentioned it, but last April, Belgium and the Czech Republic called for new European Union sanctions for Russian interference in the EU elections, besides participating, as you mentioned, in EU economic sanctions against Russia for the invasion of Ukraine. I'd like to ask, what impact do these sanctions have on Belgium's economy and its relations with other EU countries?
Well, we were hit by the sanctions. We tried to make sure that the sanctions that the European Union decided upon were sanctions that would hit mostly the Russian abilities. But we should not forget that it was a hard time. Yet, actually, 2 points of view in the European Union, and Belgium was very much like you mentioned the Harmel Doctrine, the terrains de détente. We try to work with Russia through our trade. So yes, Russia was in the top 10 of our trading partners after the invasion, of course, by Ukraine. That changed, but it did come with a price for the Belgian population, for the Belgian prosperity, a price that we were more than willing to pay. But if you look at the general picture, it was a major change in Europe, because we were very much dependent, not so much Belgium, because Belgium had already diversified its energy sources. So we did that years ago, where we decided to diversify. But a lot of European countries were still almost fully dependent on Russian gas and Russian oil. So the European consumer and the average citizen actually did pay a high price, literally a high energy price. I think we used the threat by Russia to turn our energy policy around, and so actually we used the threat to come to a more future-looking and independent energy source of Europe. One of the main economic topics between Canada and Belgium at the moment, for example, is making sure that we get green hydrogen from Canada. so we can come to a more sustainable energy policy in the European Union, diversify and making sure that we're no longer dependent. And I think we've actually done a good job. And I think because there's a lot of criticisms that I hear of the European Union once again has proven to be extremely resilient, and we've really made sure that this dependence on Russia and energy was built off in a very short time.
Thank you for that, Your Excellency. I'd like to turn a bit to focus on defense spending now. Canada and Belgium both have struggled to meet the 2% GDP spending commitment. Last year, both of our countries spent approximately 1.2%. And this has led to some significant consequences. There was a retired Lieutenant General, Mark Thies, who I hope I pronounced that correctly, who said in a December interview that the limited budget has created a severe shortage of ammunition for the Belgian armed forces, and that securing adequate ammunition just for 2 months of conflict would require between 5 and 7 billion euros each alone. How can we both better motivate our countries to meet these NATO commitments and to keep our militaries prepared for the future?
Well, for us in July 2021, Belgium, a little bit like Canada has done, but we did it before Canada, we adopted our STAR plan. And the STAR plan was to make sure that the target was 2030, but in reality, it's 2035 to come to the full 2% of the GDP. And I think Belgium has always been a very loyal partner. We always tried to be very operational within NATO, making sure that we had the capability to participate in NATO missions, for example, in the one in Afghanistan. Now, when it comes to the STAR plan, it's security, technology, ambition, and resilience. And there's several pillars. But the first pillar is making sure that we have the recruits. And so we set a quite ambitious target again for Belgium to have 29,000 soldiers operational at all times. And now we have to motivate, but I think this target will help to motivate people to join the army again. The other pillar, which is really important, of course, is everything which has to do with equipment. But Belgium has invested a lot. We're just waiting for the F-35 fighter jets. We have done the necessary to buy more frigates. But the other point is also that we need to think about how we spend the money, because it's very easy to go to 2%. If all countries in the European Union just try to buy the same planes or the same other armored trucks, and then the prices go up, and that is not what we want. We want smart spending, and that's, I think, it's a point that we had also in common with Canada. And there you can actually see the cooperation of the European Union being useful, because what the European Union can do is making sure that the standards remain NATO. Reassure everybody, standards remain NATO standards. But of course, when it comes to the analysis of what we need and the way we try to work together, that could make a big difference. I think in the European Union, we have like 35 armed systems, whereas in the United States, you have 10. Now, we spend a lot of money as individual EU member states. We just need to make sure that we work more closely together. And that's why Belgium always tries to make sure that if there is a new industrial project, that we are a part of this project, whether it has to do with the Navy or the air. This is really important. And I think one cannot forget the security challenges have changed. So we go now to the challenges that is hybrid threats. So like Canada, we build in the STAR plan a whole new pillar on hybrid on threats. One cannot forget space. And if you look at what Belgium does in space, we're actually punching a lot above our weight. If you look at the contributions for the European Space Agency, we're the 5th largest donor. So that is important for us. And I think, as said, we are an open economy. We were hurt really badly during the First World War and the Second World War. Give those two take those two elements together, and then you will understand why for us, for Belgians, multilateral level is important. But not only that, we are ready to give up some of our sovereignty to make sure that we can work together with other partners in the European Union or with partners in NATO. And we need to go to smart public purchasing of equipment. The public procurement, for example, for our frigates, we do that together with the Netherlands. So we give the Netherlands the lead. They're the ones who buy the frigates for us. This is not that evident, but it makes sure that you can go to smart spending, because, of course, if you have two countries who buy frigates together, that makes sure that you can negotiate on the price, on the quality. And for Belgium, well, going back to the First World War, we, of course, afterwards developed a huge expertise in demining. So everything which has to do with demining is something that we do that together as well with the Netherlands, and that's where Belgium takes the lead. So it's the 2% is important. The Belgian government is committed. We'll have elections beginning of June to see whether we can come faster to this 2% spending. But we have to make sure that it's intelligent spending, and this is something we have in common, because I know this is also a concern for the Canadian Armed Forces. But there's still a long way to go. But if you look at what's happened the last 2 years in terms of cooperation within the European Union, and also in NATO, in terms of working together, making sure that we do this public purchasing. For us, of course, there's one more element, we're a host to NATO, both the civil and the military component. And we're also a host to EU institutions. That for us, it brings, of course, an extra responsibility to make sure those institutions can work safely in Belgium. So that's also a top priority. And like I said, the hybrid threats, everything which has to do with influencing foreign interference in our parliament or in European Parliament, that of course is a particular responsibility for Belgium. That's why our Prime Minister intervened and denounced the intervention, the interference by Russia during the elections, the ongoing European elections. So yeah, there's a lot, but let's see how we can work more closely together in a smart way. And I see already on the ground a lot of projects that make us work more closely together and spend the money better, more wisely.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency. You've sort of preempted my next question, so I'll try to phrase it in a way that you can focus on new things. But as you said, despite only spending 1.2% of the GDP on your defense, Belgium's in the middle of several procurement projects: the F-35, the new anti-submarine warfare frigates, new minesweepers, JLTV armored vehicles. And again, you already sort of touched on this, but moving forward, as the defense budget increases year after year up to 2035, where do you see the priorities being? I mean, is it mainly in new platforms, or is it hybrid warfare, or where do you see most of the future spending going?
Yeah, it's of course to the next government to decide will spend, but one of the issues that I don't hear in your question is about recruitment. And I think that remains one of the major challenges, making sure that our soldiers, our new soldiers, are ready for combat. I think there's a lot of focus on the equipment, but there should be more focus, I think, generally on the training of our soldier, all the joint operations, and making sure that they are equipped, but that are of course trained and have the necessary experience. For Belgium, when we come back to Ukraine, of course, we're active also like Canada in the east flank of the European Union. So we have soldiers and the fighter jets in both in Romania and in Lithuania. And I think, yeah, making sure that we keep, because it's the equipment, but it's the training, but it's also all the operations that that are very expensive. So I don't see an issue. We'll have difficult discussions on where to spend the money in a priority way. But yeah, equipment definitely. A lot has been engaged already. It takes time. Let's not forget, for example, for the F-16s, they like a 30-year cycle that we had. We'll see with the F-35s how long they will last, and then we come to the training and making sure that there's more. I think what we've seen, especially in Belgium in the last 2 years, is almost like a revolution where investment in military equipment is again acceptable. We see a lot of our companies now ready to do so. A lot of them were more active in the dual use field, but when it comes to munitions, for example, we have for smaller munitions, we have our company in the south of the country, and they will work closely together with the Belgian government. And the Belgian government has given the guarantee that this company can continue working, and now they have a cooperation also going on with France. So I think this industrial base is something where we will keep on investing as well.
In terms of the you mentioned the manpower, if I can rephrase. What are some possible solutions or things that Belgium might implement to increase their manpower, both in active and reserve personnel?
When you speak about manpower, one of the items we can look at is also women power. Make sure that we have more women in the army. Make sure we have the diversity in terms of the expertise. What we ask now of our soldiers is a lot more than we used to ask in the past. So this constant training, making sure that they're up to speed with new technologies, that will be a huge challenge. And therefore, what the war in Ukraine has created is like a mentality shift. And that is important. That in the past we said, well, our army mostly dedicated to foreign operations in the framework of UN, NATO, whatever. But now we see that we have come to a close cooperation where actually our defense is a partner to our industry, and our industry is a partner to our defense, and that will make sure that our companies are stimulated to invest in innovation, also for military purposes. And that was not that evident not so long ago. So yeah, it is important.
Thank you. Shifting a little bit to perhaps some more European central talk. As the heart of Europe, Belgium is the founding member of the European Union and privy to hosting many of its diplomatic institutions. So I'd be curious to know, first, about which values and ideals of the Belgian identity have seeped into the European Union.
Well, we're an open economy, so I think the fact that we're willing to give up some of our sovereignty, that remains why Belgium is still within the European Union, leading when it comes to new ideas for the European Union. We always try to find partners, but for example, when it comes to our foreign policy, you know that foreign policy in the European Union is still based on consensus among the member states of the European Union. For Belgium, we're ready to work with qualified majority voting, for example. So always try to make sure that the European Union, the operational capability of the European Union is being reinforced, that we work in an efficient manner. This is also one of the priorities also for our foreign minister, because we have the presidency until the end of the month, is making sure we have for the new member states, for example, for Ukraine, that we start the intergovernmental process, the talks for accession of Ukraine to the European Union. But for us, enlarging, yes, but at the same time, we need to make sure that, and that has been a preoccupation Belgium since the beginning of the European Union, make sure that the machine works efficiently. It's a lot of member states, a lot of diversity, which for us also means a lot of the richness, the wealth of the European Union. And one of the, well, as you see, you have a lot of threats. And one of the threats is also the climate. It's being recognized also by NATO as one of the instability factors of the security in the world. And so European Union, European Commission has actually taken the lead to go to a green revolution with a Green Deal in Europe. What we now say as Belgium during the presidency, because we had the presidency with two parts. The first part was more oriented towards the legislative package of the European Union. One of the last decisions that we actually decided upon as Belgian presidency was making sure, for example, for Ukraine, that we could use the revenues for the frozen assets that Russian frozen assets that are in Europe. But this climate change is important, will remain a top priority, but we will see for us what Belgium tries to push now towards the next European Commission, the next European Parliament, is to make sure that we also have like an industrial deal, because we see that the level playing field is not always internationally being respected. We need sure that we protect our companies, that they can work on the same values. So yeah, and if the heart of the matter of the European Union remains, of course, the internal market. We have a report by Mr. Letta on the ways that we can reinforce the internal market. So there's a lot of challenges for the European Union, and Belgium will. Now we do it as a EU presidency, but after the 1st of July, we'll do it again as a stimulating member of the European Union, making sure that everybody keeps the ambition level for the European Union to work both internally, but also internationally as a solid partner.
Thank you. So now moving on to the second part of the question. I'd be curious to also find out what is or how, in your opinion, the Belgian identity has possibly been enriched from the diversity of the Union.
Well, yeah. Well, we have, of course, Brussels, which has become, during all these years, a very international city. Brussels is host to a lot of delegations with European Union embassies in general. So definitely when it comes to Brussels, the European Union, but also the fact that we have NATO around Brussels, it has really strengthened the international character of our capital. And for us, this is, like we said, we're an open economy, so it's a natural given. But this diversity is also the richness. And if we look at where we get our prosperity from, it's still the internal market of the European Union. We've seen it with the Brexit. UK has left the European Union. That cost you in terms of growth, and I think that remains at the heart. But so much more. We'll have during the next strategic plan of the European Union after the elections beginning of June. We'll have a newly composed European Parliament, but we'll have to set a strategic agenda again, not only in terms of the enlargement of the European Union, but also in terms of legislative proposals where we want to go. And I think one of the top priorities will be making sure that the internal market is strengthened again.
Thank you. And now we would like to bring the moderated discussion to a close. We will proceed with the live Q&A, and again, reminder to our audience that the floor is open to any of your questions. And with that, I would like to begin with a question from Jake. How does the current Belgian government view the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement, particularly regarding its economic benefits and potential challenges for Belgium?
Well, those who have followed the discussions, I was trade director a long time ago, so I was involved at one point with the negotiations of the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement between Canada and the European Union. There were some doubts in the beginning. Doubts, first of all, that had to do with the farmers, which is classical because farmers felt that there could be too much Canadian agricultural products coming into the market of the European Union. In the end of the day, that has not been the case. Actually, what we've seen is both for Canada and for European Union, we have seen an increase of the imports, the exports, and I think that is important. But which is even more important for us, I see it also as a living agreement. So there's still a lot of potential. One of the elements we're working on within the European Union and between the European Union and Canada is, for example, making sure that architects in Europe can work in Canada and the other way around. This is not that obvious. This can happen because Canada and Belgium are like-minded countries. And also, if you look at the major challenges between in the world, when you look at the climate challenge, we also see that Canada and the European Union, through these agreements, can work more closely together. The whole element of promoting green products, for example, this is something you can do through your trade deal. So yeah, we've all benefited, and I know there's still some questions about ratification, but it's provisionally entered into force, and so we can hope we can continue working with this with the excellent results.
And then a follow-up to that question from Jake as well. He was saying, what is the current status of the CETA's ratification within Belgium, especially considering the position of the, I hope I pronounced this right, Walloon Parliament and other regional parliaments on the agreement?
Yeah. Well, we're one of the few countries in the world where an international agreement is not only ratified at the federal level, but also at a regional level, which corresponds to the provinces here in Canada. So it makes the ratification process, I would say, very democratic, but also very challenging. What we have done so far at the federal level, the CETA agreement was ratified also in the north of the country, Flanders. It's true that in the south of the country, the French-speaking part, it has not been ratified, but given the results, I'm quite confident that this will happen. But we'll have to wait for elections that it will be part of what we agree upon after the elections in June.
Thank you. Now, I also wanted to touch on the internal social, cultural, primarily linguistic differences that have contributed to a recent rise of a partition movement in Belgium. I was hoping perhaps you could speak a little bit to this movement, and also, with the surge of Flemish nationalism, speak to what the future would be for Belgium and also the Belgian capital, Brussels.
Well, there's a lot of similarities between Canada and Belgium. And actually, if you look at, I also find, I'll take this as an example because it's quite ironic that you actually at the north of the country in Belgium, Flanders, where they speak Flemish or Dutch, that they actually work quite closely together with Quebec on defending languages, because it's not the French language that is under pressure in Belgium. It's more the Flemish Dutch language that is under pressure. But when I compare a little bit situation, one often refers still to a linguistic discussion. I think it's less the case. I think we have sort of found the balance in Belgium on the use of languages, a lot of protection for example, the position of Dutch in Brussels. But it's more also a question of ideology that is different, because the starting points were very different. The South had an industrial base and had to challenge to come to a more modern economy based on this older industrial base, whereas the North did not really have this industrial base, and it was easier to catch up. It was more the North that was asking for more cultural freedom in a way, but the South was actually looking for more economic empowerment. And since the situation is different in the north and in the south, the economic situation, you see more tensions on the way we have to deal, for example, with people. Unemployment, for example, in the north is extremely low, whereas in the south it is higher. So that makes that your policy choices are going to be different, because your point of view, your starting point of view, is different. So we'll see after elections. It's always a very difficult process in Belgium when it comes. I think same here in Canada, when it comes to autonomy and questions on how to deal with. Also to make sure that the prosperity is equally divided amongst those who need it the most. But it will be a process, but people are talking. So we'll see. But after the elections, it's always before the elections that you sort of have the positions that are hardened. But I think after the elections, we'll start talking again between the different communities and make sure that we get an outcome like we always have found, a balanced outcome between the north and the south.
So then I wanted to ask then on the point of Brussels, because from what I understand is geographically within Flanders, but not part of the Flemish region.
Yeah.
What would be the future of the capital?
Well, Brussels is, well, as I said, we have regions and communities, but it sort of corresponds to the provinces. And it's true that geographically, the Brussels region is within Flanders, but it's a separate region. And when it comes to economic affairs, it's up to the Brussels region to deal with its economic challenges, just like it's the case for Wallonia in the south and to Flanders in the north of the country. When it comes, because it's the capital also, Brussels is also the capital of Flanders. So when it comes to more cultural or linguistic affairs, education, and those are actually issues that are being dealt with by the communities. So Flanders community or the French-speaking community in Brussels, they deal with those issues, and they have to work together as well. But there is, of course, making sure that those two different language communities are being cared for. But yeah,
Thank you so
yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador, for your answer. I also wanted to ask, to what extent do Belgian domestic divisions and regional linguistic conflicts impact Belgian foreign policy, inhibiting its ability to present itself as a unified front, especially within NATO? In other words, how does public opinion in Belgium influence the country's NATO policies and contributions?
Yeah. Now, I think as Belgian diplomat, you were actually quite spoiled in the way that our foreign policy has always been the subject of consensus. Contrary to other countries, there's not that much of a divide when it comes to our foreign politics. The top priorities, like I said, NATO remains the top priority. There's not a discussion on the membership of NATO or commitment to NATO, 2%. That is all basically consensus, supported by the governments in the past, supported by the parliaments in the past. Also, our attachment to the European Union is not being questioned. So basically, as a diplomat working for Belgium, it's actually easy because you mentioned, for example, the Hormel doctrine that was mentioned, that was adopted in 1967. This is still part of our policy, so this continuity, and that actually gives also credibility to Belgian diplomacy in general. We are a partner, a loyal partner, both within NATO, both within the European Union, and that gives credibility, because if you change your policy every time you change your government, it makes it harder to get this credibility towards your partners. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Ambassador. Unfortunately, I have to keep hitting you with the spending questions.
Yeah.
So in February, the Belgian government backed the idea of an EU bond program to boost European defense investment. Can you speak a bit more about potential Belgian participation and whether or not Belgian voters would support that kind of borrowing to improve the armed forces?
Yeah. This is, if you look at European Union, the way we spend money is actually something where there's quite a divide between among the European countries. Well, I'd say that Belgium is a little bit in between. So you have the countries who say, well, we don't want to spend the frugal ones, like they say in European Union, and so they're the net contributors mostly to the budget of the European Union. Now, Belgium is also in the new framework. We're also contributing a net contributor to the European budget. But this being said, we're always in the middle. If you look at and if you want to say something which Belgium has contributed to the European Union, it's maybe the art of compromise, making sure that we find each other in the middle. And a lot of the European solutions are actually being taken at the middle ground between the different fractions. And a lot of times those agreements, those final agreements, correspond very much to what Belgium asked in the beginning, because we were in the heart of Europe, and often that determines the outcome as well of the position. Now, when it comes to the bonds, we believe that we can use the credibility at the end of the day of the European Union to go for bonds. But let's do that in a very careful manner, because it's also about the credibility of the Belgian system. And one of the major challenges, because Belgium has been performing economically quite well the last years, but we also have a challenge with our debt, so we don't want to burden the Belgian taxpayers anymore. We'll find a solution, but in principle, yes, we feel that European Union is actually for us an opportunity to make sure that collectively we do those debts, and it will give credibility, put Europe and Belgium also in a better position to negotiate.
Thank you. And we have a question from our audience here, from Victoria, who asks, how is NATO intertwined with the new Belgian EU agenda, such as the strategic direction of the EU and progressing the enlargement agenda forward?
Like I said, we as European Union need to step up our game. We need to take more responsibility when it comes to the defense. We need to, and this is something which we'll do together with all EU member states. Now, when it comes to defense, this remains very much, as we spoke about trade earlier, when it comes to defense, this remains very much a national competence. And you still see that the way we spend our money, the way we work together, is often still seen by the governments and decided by the individual governments. Now, of course, they have to make sure that they respect all our NATO commitments. But in the end of the day, there's not a lot of vision to work together. Belgium has tried in the past to stimulate all initiatives for working more closely together as European countries to make sure that we spend assets in a smarter way. But the two, NATO and European Union being strengthened, is actually not one or the other. I think it's an and I think if the European Union can pull its weight more when it comes to defense industry, when it comes to making sure that we're operational, and we have a lot of projects, what they call the PESCO project, for example, where also Canada participates in terms of mobility. So yes, European Union being strengthened, and also making sure that we keep within European Union, of course, our solidarity with NATO, but also that we work with other partners than the European Union partners. And I think we're basically doing that. We come back to the Hormel doctrine as well. So I think they're speaking to other countries is important. Belgium participates and contributes, for example, for the dialogue that NATO has with Mediterranean countries. I said we participate in the military operations in Afghanistan, but also in other countries. And yeah, it's a two-way street. Let's put it that way.
Thank you. We have a question from Mavericks, who said that in a recent discussion with the Ambassador of Finland and their celebration of their first year of joining NATO, he touched upon the way public opinion is maintained and supported in Finland in regards to NATO. So, Mavericks says she's wondering where Belgium is concerned, given that it has been a part of NATO from the start, and there's still a need to maintain public opinion, and how is it regarded generally from the civilian standpoint?
Yeah, public opinion is important, because in the end of the day, it's public opinion that votes our politicians. Now, when it comes to public opinion in Belgium, generally speaking, because you always have exceptions, but generally speaking, there's quite a lot of support both for European Union and NATO, and also the realization that we'll have to do more, that we'll have to take additional steps, because we do feel, and the threats that are out there. I think Belgian consumers, in particular, when they had to pay the high energy prices, or even there was at one point there was talk that there would be blackouts for certain parts of the country or industry. So I think, yeah, the public opinion has been influenced by the threat that they see. We cannot forget also when it comes to Ukraine, here in Canada. Canada hosted a lot of Ukrainian refugees, but in Belgium, like in other countries, we were not a neighboring country to Ukraine, but Ukrainians did arrive with their cars. They arrived by train, by bus. So Belgian society was confronted with the influx of Ukrainian refugees. So I think all Belgians have seen by their own eyes these refugees, and what I want to recall at this point is because they came in large numbers and very fast, so there was no really way to prepare. Is what we see a lot of solidarity by the Belgians. They actually opened up their houses to make sure that the refugees coming from Ukraine had a place to sleep. After a while, of course, Belgian government, both federal and regional governments, were able to make sure that everybody was correctly hosted by all the refugees were hosted. But at the beginning of the first days, that was just not possible because of the numbers. Belgium was already confronted by a very high number of asylum seekers, so there was a lot of pressure already on our infrastructure to host refugees and asylum seekers.
Thank you. I wanted to bring us back to the idea of manpower, woman power, as you corrected and added as well. And I wanted to mention that it's been reported that the Belgian armed forces are losing talent. Up to 6% of men and women between the age of 30 and 40 are annually leaving the military, shifting their lives from khaki to camouflage and camouflage to chinos and corporate attire. So with that, I wanted maybe to get a wrap up of, what are some of the challenges in the Belgian forces, but also what are some strategies? I mean, you mentioned the industrial piece, but perhaps what are some other strategies to incentivize Belgians to join the military? I mean, looking at quick statistics here, there is, total military personnel is at around 32,000, let's say, and fit for service is around 4 million. And so what are some possible lessons you can draw from NATO allies to scale up the personnel, or is that necessary in Belgium's capacity and youth? Perhaps maybe the industrial sector is more important.
Yeah, we do actually compare notes on recruitment between Canada and Belgium because we're faced with the same challenges in the end of the day. I think there's different ways to make sure that recruitment is up to the level it's supposed to be. One, of course, is making sure that our soldiers are being paid correctly. But a lot of people see that also with the younger generation. they're just very committed, and they look for challenges. And if you look at what a young soldier can do within the military, in terms of what you get in terms of training, the equipment that you can use, there's so much possibilities that you have in the army now, and I think that motivates young people to join the army. And of course, the army has the responsibility to, and what they're doing more and more is making sure that when young people are looking for jobs, that we also have our army there. One of the we have our National Day on the 21st of July, and our army is always there in the heart of Brussels, showing their equipment, all the possibilities, and it's actually attracted a lot of people every year. And all those, even if kids are 5 or 6, and they see all the machines, they see, they're just impressed. But those are going to be the people who are going to join, very motivated later on your armed forces. I think what we can do as government in the end of the day is just making sure that we confirm that it's for our country a priority. Our army is a priority, and they will make sure that we give the necessary means that our soldiers can work as they should be able to work.
Thank you. And with that, one final question. I know earlier we talked and compared a little bit the Flemish and Quebec nationalism situation, but Marina wanted to follow up on a question more specific about that. We hope that you were able to expand a little bit. Marina, here, if you may.
I just wanted to ask if it would be possible to compare Quebec nationalism to the Belgium's experience with regional linguistic conflicts, especially considering the rise of Flemish nationalism.
Well, it's in the end of the day, as I said, for the south of Belgium was more a matter of getting autonomy on economic affairs. For Flanders, it was more a matter of identity, and I think this is something where Quebec and Flanders actually find themselves in. They wanted to make sure that the language, language that we have in common with the Netherlands in the north of the country, that it was used. So they were looking for this, and this is also the case for Quebec. They were looking for this cultural identity, making sure that when you put on your television, that you hear programs in your national language, that when you go and are being educated, that your own language, one of the main, and this is the same for Quebec. It's the fact that you support your universities and make sure that your universities, and we did it through legislation as well, make sure that your universities give diplomas in the language in the Flemish language or in the French language in Quebec. It's an empowering of a language, one could say culture as well, and so that is very the two are very like-minded in that way. Set cultural identity, making sure you can do that on stage, and just make sure that the language that is the language of the people that live there is being seen as a reference language. This being said, of course, there is a lot of tolerance, of course, for people who do not speak Flemish, and everybody is welcome. Flanders in this case is also very international.
Well, thank you. Looks like that's all we have time for today. I did want to mention that huge thank you as well to our audiences that joined us here live today, and also those that will through our networks watch the recordings of this interview. But Your Excellency, we would like to convey our sincerest thanks for your time, for your thoughtful responses, and also thank you to our panelists, Chris and Marina, and to all of us that you have joined us today virtually. So, cheers.
Thank you very much, Apostles Christian and Marina. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, so I've ended the stream.